What if I told you that The Rock almost didn't go through with his final WWE match? That 45 minutes before his farewell, he was sitting in his locker room having second thoughts about the biggest decision of his career? The conversation that changed his mind happened with someone who knew him better than anyone. Someone who'd been keeping a secret about The Rock's future that would shock the wrestling world. April 7, 2003. The Safeco Field in Seattle was buzzing with 54,000 WWE fans who had no idea they were about to witness the end of an era. WrestleMania 19 was stacked with legendary matches, but the one everyone was talking about was The Rock vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin, billed as Austin's retirement match, but secretly serving as The Rock's farewell to full-time wrestling. In the gorilla position, the staging area just behind the entrance curtain, Dwayne Johnson sat alone on a metal folding chair, staring at his hands. The hands that had thrown countless punches, delivered thousands of rock bottoms, and held multiple WWE championships. Tonight, those hands would compete in a WWE ring for what he believed would be the last time. But 45 minutes before his scheduled entrance, The Rock was having the biggest crisis of confidence in his life. The decision to leave WWE wasn't made lightly. His Hollywood career was exploding after the Scorpion King's success, and movie studios were lining up with offers that would make him financially secure for life. But sitting there in his wrestling gear, listening to the crowd chanting his name through the arena walls, Dwayne felt like he was about to betray everything that had made him who he was. Wrestling wasn't just his career, it was his family legacy. His grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, had been a wrestling legend. His father, Rocky Johnson, was a WWE Hall of Famer. The Johnson family name was synonymous with professional wrestling excellence. And now he was about to walk away from it all for Hollywood. Second thoughts. The voice came from behind him. Dwayne turned to see Pat Patterson, the legendary wrestler and WWE producer who had become like a second father to many in the locker room. Pat was in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen every possible wrestling drama unfold over 4 decades in the business. More like third and fourth thoughts, Dwayne admitted. Pat sat down in the chair next to him, groaning slightly as his knees creaked. You know, in all my years in this business, I've seen a lot of people leave wrestling. Some leave angry, some leave broken, some leave forgotten. But you're leaving as the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. That's not something to regret. But what if I'm making the wrong choice? Dwayne asked. What if Hollywood doesn't work out? What if I'm just another wrestler who thinks he can act? Pat was quiet for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Before I answer that, I need to show you something. Vince asked me to give this to you if you started having doubts. Dwayne unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten letter on WWE letterhead, signed by Vince McMahon. As he read it, his eyes widened. The letter wasn't a goodbye, it was a promise. Vince had written that no matter how successful The Rock became in Hollywood, he would always have a home in WWE. Not just for special appearances or one-off matches, but as a continuing part of the WWE family. The letter outlined a unique arrangement that had never been offered to any other wrestler. The Rock could return whenever he wanted, for however long he wanted, with complete creative control over his character and storylines. More shocking was the final paragraph. Vince revealed that he'd been secretly negotiating with movie studios to ensure that The Rock's film contracts would always allow for WWE appearances. Hollywood would get their movie star, but WWE would never truly lose The Rock. He wrote this 6 months ago, Pat said, watching Dwayne's reaction. He knew this day would come, and he wanted you to know that this isn't really goodbye. Dwayne felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He wasn't abandoning wrestling, he was expanding into a bigger stage while keeping his foundation intact. There's something else, Pat continued. Something Vince didn't put in that letter because he wanted me to tell you personally. Pat leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The Rock character, your character, it's bigger than WWE now. Vince knows that. In 5 years, maybe 10, wrestling is going to need mainstream stars to help it grow. When that time comes, The Rock won't just be returning as a wrestler. He'll be returning as the most famous person who's ever stepped foot in a WWE ring. The prediction seemed impossible in 2003. Wrestling was still considered lowbrow entertainment by mainstream media. The idea that a wrestler could become a legitimate global superstar seemed like fantasy. You really think that's possible? Dwayne asked. Pat smiled. Kid, I've been around long enough to recognize once-in-a-generation talent. You have something that transcends wrestling. Don't feel guilty about taking it to the next level. 20 minutes before his match, Dwayne was in his private locker room going through his pre-match ritual stretching, visualizing his performance, and getting into the mindset of the Rock character. But tonight felt different. Instead of preparing for just another match, he was preparing for a graduation ceremony. There was a knock on his door. "Come in." To his surprise, it was Steve Austin, his opponent for the evening and one of his closest friends in the business. Stone Cold looked uncharacteristically emotional, which was saying something since this was also his final match. "Rock," Steve said, using Dwayne's real name instead of his character name. "I wanted to talk to you before we go out there." Steve sat down across from Dwayne, his own wrestling gear a reminder that both men were about to close chapters in their lives. "This business has been everything to both of us," Steve said. "We've beat the hell out of each other, made each other better, and probably made more money together than any two wrestlers in history. But tonight isn't about endings, it's about what we built." Steve reached into his gym bag and pulled out a small metal object. It was a custom-made championship belt buckle, but instead of WWE Champion or World Champion, it simply said Brothers. "I had this made for both of us," Steve said, handing an identical buckle to Dwayne. "Because no matter where our careers take us after tonight, we'll always be brothers who helped change this business." Dwayne looked at the buckle, feeling the weight of their friendship and their shared legacy. He and Steve had main event 3 WrestleManias together, had some of the most memorable feuds in wrestling history, and had pushed each other to heights neither could have reached alone. "Steve, I don't know if I'm ready for this to be over." "Hell, neither do I," Steve admitted. "But Rock, we're not ending our story tonight. We're just finishing this chapter so we can start writing new ones." 10 minutes before the match, Dwayne made his way toward the gorilla position for the final time as an active WWE wrestler. But as he walked through the backstage area, something unprecedented happened. The entire locker room was lined up in the hallway. Every wrestler on the roster, from main eventers to rookies, from faces to heels, was standing in 2 lines, creating a corridor that Dwayne would walk through on his way to the ring. This had never been done before for any wrestler, no matter how legendary their career. At the front of the line stood The Undertaker, WWE's most respected veteran and unofficial locker room leader. As Dwayne approached, The Undertaker stepped forward. "Rock," The Undertaker said in his distinctive gravelly voice, "this business has been built by legends. Tonight, you join that list officially. But more than that, you're proving that wrestling can create global superstars. You're opening doors for everyone who comes after you." One by one, as Dwayne walked down the corridor, wrestlers stepped forward to shake his hand or offer words of encouragement. Some were emotional, some were professional, but all of them understood they were witnessing history. Triple H, who had been The Rock's rival and friend for years, simply said, "Go show Hollywood what wrestling talent really looks like." Mick Foley, the hardcore legend who had helped The Rock develop his character in the early days, pulled him aside for a quick embrace. "You saved my career once by making me relevant again," Mick whispered. "Now you're going to save the entire industry by showing the world what we're capable of." But the most emotional moment came from an unexpected source. As Dwayne neared the end of the corridor, he saw a young wrestler he barely knew, a rookie who had only been with the company for a few months. The kid couldn't have been more than 22, with nervous energy and stars in his eyes. "Mr. Rock," the young wrestler said, his voice shaking slightly. "I just want you to know that watching you perform is the reason I became a wrestler. You showed me that this business could be artistic and athletic and entertaining all at the same time." Dwayne stopped walking. This kid represented something important, the future of wrestling, the next generation that would carry the industry forward. "What's your name, son?" "John Cena, sir." Dwayne looked at this young wrestler, this John Cena, and saw something familiar in his eyes. The same hunger, the same passion, the same desire to entertain that had driven The Rock's own career. "John," Dwayne said, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder, "someday this company is going to need someone to carry it into the future. When that time comes, remember this moment. Remember that being a wrestler means being an entertainer first and an athlete second. The crowd doesn't care how strong you are, they care how you make them feel." John Cena nodded earnestly, absorbing every word. Neither man knew that this brief conversation was passing a torch that would burn for the next 2 decades. Finally, Dwayne reached the gorilla position. Vince McMahon was waiting for him, along with the production crew that would coordinate his entrance. But instead of the usual pre-match briefing, Vince pulled Dwayne aside for a private moment. "Rock," Vince said, "I've been promoting wrestling for 30 years. I've seen superstars come and go, I've watched legends retire, and I've said goodbye to some of the greatest performers in entertainment history. but I've never been more proud of anyone than I am of you right now." Vince's voice was unusually emotional. The hard-nosed businessman who was known for his ruthless decision-making was showing genuine sentiment. "You came to me as a third-generation wrestler with a famous last name and a lot of potential. You're leaving as the most complete entertainer this industry has ever produced. But more than that, you're leaving as family." Vince handed Dwayne a small box. Inside was a custom WWE Championship belt, but instead of being gold-plated, it was made of actual gold. The nameplate read, "The People's Champion Forever." "This isn't a prop," Vince said. "This is a reminder that no matter how big you become in Hollywood, you'll always be wrestling royalty. And when you're ready to come home, whether that's next year or in 20 years, this will be waiting for you." The Rock's music hit, and 54,000 people erupted in the loudest reaction of the night. As Dwayne walked through the curtain for what he thought would be the last time, he wasn't thinking about endings anymore. He was thinking about possibilities. The match itself was everything it needed to be, a passing of the torch from two legends to the next generation, a celebration of their careers, and a perfect ending to their rivalry. When it was over and The Rock had picked up the victory, he stood in the center of the ring absorbing the crowd's appreciation one final time. But the real magic happened after the cameras stopped rolling. As the arena emptied and the production crew began breaking down the equipment, The Rock remained in the ring. Steve Austin joined him, and together they sat on the middle rope, looking out at the empty seats where 54,000 people had just been entertained. "You know what's funny?" Steve said. "All night I was worried about this being the end. But sitting here now, it feels like the beginning of something bigger." The Rock nodded. "Pat Patterson told me something tonight that I can't stop thinking about. He said that in 10 years, wrestling is going to need mainstream stars to help it grow. What if our real contribution to this business isn't what we did in the ring, but what we do after we leave it?" They sat in comfortable silence for a few more minutes, then made their way backstage for the final time as active wrestlers. In the years that followed, Pat Patterson's prediction proved prophetic. The Rock became one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and when he returned to WWE for special appearances, he brought mainstream attention that helped the company reach new heights. But more importantly, that night at WrestleMania 19 established a blueprint for how wrestling superstars could transition to mainstream entertainment while maintaining their connection to the business that created them. The backstage moments before The Rock's final match weren't just about saying goodbye, they were about establishing a legacy that would outlast any individual career. The emotional conversations, the locker room respect, and the promises of future returns created a template that other wrestlers would follow for decades. John Cena, the young wrestler who had been so moved by meeting The Rock that night, would go on to become WWE's next breakout star and eventually follow The Rock's path to Hollywood success. The championship belt that Vince McMahon presented to The Rock now sits in a place of honor in Dwayne Johnson's home office, next to his movie awards and business achievements. It serves as a reminder of where he came from and the family that will always welcome him home. And Pat Patterson's secret prediction? The Rock's eventual returns to WWE, culminating in his appearances at recent WrestleManias, have indeed brought mainstream attention and new fans to wrestling, proving that some goodbyes are really just, "see you later." The backstage drama before The Rock's final match revealed something that fans rarely get to see, that wrestling isn't just about what happens in the ring. It's about family, legacy, and the understanding that true superstars are bigger than any one company or industry. Sometimes the most important moments happen when the cameras aren't rolling, when the crowd has gone home, and when the real people behind the characters get to say what they really mean. That night in Seattle, The Rock didn't just end his wrestling career, he began his transformation into a global icon while ensuring that his wrestling family knew he would never forget where he came from. Disclaimer: this story is created for entertainment purposes only and is not based on real events. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The content is fictional and intended for humor and storytelling purposes.